Norway started industrializing in the 1840s, together with Sweden. Friedrich List, which we'll come to, is a very important economist. The first language he was translated into was Swedish. And I carry with me, in my wallet, I carry a Swedish banknote. Because I've just been to Sweden. And we were under Sweden. And this Swedish banknote, 500 kroner, on the one side of the banknote is a guy called Christopher Polhem. And Christopher Polhem died in 1751. And he said, Sweden, he was an engineer, and he said, even though we have very rich copper mines, we have to industrialize because the copper is going to run out. And the more copper we take out for every ounce, it's going to be more expensive, diminishing returns. Right? So here is their big hero. On the other side is a picture of the first central bank in the world, the Swedish central bank from 1661. The United States had a central bank in 1913. Yeah, Sveriges Riksbank. And the Swedes are now throwing away this bill. That's why I'm collecting it. And they're putting an opera singer on the bill, on that banknote. So my Swedish friends are saying, well, we were entering the post-knowledge society. This was a banknote from the knowledge society. And now they're entering the entertainment society. All the new Swedish banknotes, except the 1,000 note, are artists. ABBA is the only people missing. But this was something that everyone knew. And they knew they had to put up infant industry protection. And they did it in the 1750s, they did it again with the second. For every industrial revolution, there has been a period of protection. So I grew up in Norway, in a country where it was prohibited to import clothing, because the clothing business employed a lot of people, not very well paid, but it employed a lot of people. I remember rationing cards for bread. Then my mother had to take ration. I was born in 1949, not in 44. So this went on for a long time. And I remember that when we went to Sweden, there was a lot to declare. Every bit of foreign currency was stamped into my father's and mother's passports because it was limited what you can get. And when we stopped at the border to Sweden, my mother went out and the customs official put a piombo, a kind of a metal thing into her fur coat to prove that it had come from Norway, and because she wouldn't have been allowed to take the fur coat in if it had been bought in Sweden with black funds. I don't think this is a very nice thing to have, but I think it was necessary. And everybody said, well, do this for 10 years and then we can have free trade. Right? And I remember my father, he had a car before the war as a very young man. But only in 1960 could private people in Norway buy cars, because everyone knew that foreign exchange was a scarce commodity. Right? And this is it's not that I'm not that old, but these are things that was even in my lifetime. So there's a cyclical pattern of every time there is a new industrial revolution, there has been this period of protection. And if you read the first economics professor outside Germany was in Sweden, 1742. A gentleman by the name of Anders Berg. And in Anders Berg's textbook, they talk about the different economic fields of production. He said, of course, as we know, the real gold mines are not the gold mines, it's the manufacturing sector. And I read this 20 years ago, as we all know. What, 1742? Did everyone know that? And then I discovered slowly that they did and where it came from. I will get back to that. But this cult of manufacturing is incredibly important. And everyone has been through it. England protected its manufacturing for 350 years, Korea for only 40, right? But they've all been there, and I think now is the time that Ukraine does the same thing, because nobody has ever got rich without it. Mechanisms of income distribution, town, family, labor mobility, national economy. The key thing is that in the national economic period, you moved economic activities. And now what do? We move people or we move money, right? So the alternative to moving people is actually to move people, right? So this is like Latvia. You know, Latvia, all these Baltic republics were fairly advanced really during the 1930s. You know, Estonia was richer than Finland up until the 1950s. Right? They were industrialized, but then they lost their industries and people moved out. So I think there is a very important break in the EU until 1989. Before 18, I think the EU is important for you to understand that when Spain joined the European Union in the 1980s, it was very gradual. Spain had very high income tariffs, and the tariffs were lowered 10%, about 10% a year for 10 years. And there was a lot of investment, cheap credit for Spanish companies. They really wanted to make sure that the Spanish car industry survived, because the car industry employed a lot of people and a lot of labor. So there was a conscious policy in the EU. EU was in the business of moving economic activities, right? So, and then EU, particularly after 2004, you know, the EU is in the business of moving people. 20% of the population out of Latvia. So I think I was very much in favor of the EU until the evening of the 30th of April 2004. The evening of the 30th of April 2004, I was sitting in the Tallinn Opera House, and at midnight, Estonia and a lot of other countries would join the EU. And in Estonia and in these other countries, if you made €1 an hour, you were very happy. You were a winner. In the West, if you were a loser in Frankfurt, you would sweep the streets for €10 an hour. So I said, you know, this is not going to work. If it was just the population of Estonia, we could absorb it, but not these millions of people, right? So I remember I sat there and I thought, well, this is the death of the welfare state. What I'm actually attending is, yes, it's very good news in a sense for these countries, but this has to be the end of the welfare state. I'm actually attending the funeral of the welfare state, and you know, because those principles had been abandoned. You know, if the Eastern European countries had been through the same process as Spain, wouldn't have been any problem, right? But the problem was that you had the shock therapy, and the shock therapy actually killed manufacturing industry before they had their accounting system. You know, before they had a capitalist accounting system, they were bankrupt. So this was really crazy. That shock therapy was crazy. And a year and a half ago, I was invited to the Gaidar conference in Moscow, and who is presented there as a kind of a big hero? Mr. Jeffrey Sachs, who was in charge of the shock therapy. So my analysis is that the Russians suffer from the so-called Stockholm syndrome, that they identify with the people who have kidnapped them and ruined them. You know, it's a very sad thing. And I actually wrote to a couple of Russian economists that you know, I think this is what's happening, and it's very sad. You know, you have to, you know, don't kill the guy, but don't invite him as a hero. Come on, this is so they don't understand it yet, but I think they will. I think this is the good thing about this period, that things move. So we have this problem of some countries really taking off and some countries not taking off. So when I went to school in Norway, there was one country called Somalia, which was richer than another country called Korea. And then suddenly Korea takes off. And this is not because Korea gets so much better in producing rice, which is what they used to do. It's because they changed their comparative advantage from agriculture and into electronics and very high-tech stuff, with a very heavy industrial policy. And because the Americans knew that they had to sacrifice free trade for a while in order to stop communism. So, unfortunately, now there is nothing to do. Do you see the Asian crisis there, like a little bit? And what does Somalia specialize in? Piracy. Right? Robbery. Right. And when I traveled around Latin America in the early 1970s, Medellin in Colombia was the most successful industrial city in Latin America. What is it not known for now? Drugs, cocaine. Right? So there is a link here between robbery and economic structure. And I think there is a link in the same way with corruption, really large-scale corruption. Right? Corruption is like piracy and drugs, is in a way an escape clause. If you can't make money in a normal way, well, then you go into something which is illegal. So I think this is the thing with the arrow of causality I was talking the other day. You know what comes first? I think manufacturing sector becomes first, and then society changes. And this was an Italian economist in 1771. He wrote a book, a best-selling book, and it says, "From manufacturing you may expect the two greatest ills of humanity, superstition and slavery, to be healed." And what do we see now in the Middle East? Well, I deal with the Muslim Council of Singapore, and I can tell you because they publish my things. So, I think it's important to understand that the Muslims in Singapore behave very different from ISIS, right? Because one have manufacturing and the other don't. So it's not the Muslim religion; it's the Muslim religion producing what, right? Desert Muslim religion or manufacturing Muslim religion is very different. And I used to teach in Malaysia, and clearly the mentality on the East Coast, where there was no manufacturing, young people were arrested for holding hands in the cinema. The case was taken to Kuala Lumpur, which is an industrial city, and the judges laughed and put them free. I mean, this is the mentality. This is so important. This sounds strange, but it's really, really very important, and it has to do with what Max Weber called demystification.